looks like we're gonna meet, exceed expectations, so that's good. Yeah. Yeah, the different colleges do this very differently. I prefer our way. Um, I went to the investiture, to Wendy Heller's investiture, which they had in the Union, and there were many more speakers, but she didn't talk for that long. She did like maybe 10 minutes, and most of it was like personal gratitude things. It wasn't substantive, but that's kind of the way that they do stuff. Right? So, I think our way is better. Well, I look forward to talk about work. That's good enough. That's good enough. So we'll get started in about a minute here. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. See, there's call and response. Normally when I say good afternoon at these events, nobody responds, but we're on the cusp of spring break. The sun is shining. We're honoring Professor Keenan. There's happiness in this room, I'll tell you. So welcome to the Investiture of Patrick Keenan. As the Albert J. Harno Professor of Law, investitures are a longstanding tradition in academia to acknowledge and honor faculty members who have shown exemplary achievement in their scholarship, teaching, and public engagement. Although many of our students and colleagues have already departed campus for a hopefully well-earned spring break, I'm glad to see that there's such a strong show of support in the room today for Professor Keenan and all of his achievements. So I'd especially like to extend a warm welcome to his two daughters who came in from Washington, D.C. and New Haven. Is that correct? You were managed to get here okay? It's all good. You brought the sunshine and happiness with you from the East Coast, so we greatly appreciate that. It's always wonderful to see you both. As you know, investitures provide us an opportunity to honor donors in addition to celebrating our honorees, their families, and their friends. Their philanthropy helps us recruit, retain, and reward outstanding scholars and teachers who are the backbone of our law school community. The endowed position that we confer today is made possible by a generous and visionary gift from Albert E. Jenner, who is College of Law Class 1930, in honor of Albert J. Harno. Dean Harno served as Professor of Law at this college from 1921 to 1957, and as Dean for 35 years. From 1922 to 1957. In 1955, he oversaw the college's move from Altgeld Hall, which is now the math department, up on the main quad, to the current location of the law school where we are today. He was also a campus leader in addition to being the law school's leader, serving as university provost from 1931 to 1944. And apart from his legacy of academic leadership, Dean Harno was one of the country's foremost criminal law experts. And although he and Albert Jenner are no longer with us, their influence continues to guide us as we assemble a faculty whose scholarly contributions meaningfully shape the study of law and the legal profession. We're also delighted to be joined once again by a distinguished campus leader, Dr. Ami Santos. We routinely joke with Ami that she should either get an office here or an honorary degree, because she's probably earned the credits by now to get at least a master's in law. Dr. Santos' research focuses on how families and culture influence the development of young children with disabilities. And in her role at the provost's office, She develops and directs programs that facilitate faculty development and success, including faculty mentoring, support for pre-tenure and mid-career faculty, career paths for specialized faculty, and academic leadership development. Sadly for us, this is the last scheduled appearance for Dr. Santos this semester, as this is the last investiture that we have for the semester. But still, I hope you know, you will be back and you will always be welcome. Everyone, please help me welcome Dr. Santos to the podium.
Thank you again, and good afternoon, everyone. So I am honored to join you one more time to celebrate our colleague, Patrick Keenan, as the Albert J. Harno Professor of Law. On behalf of Provost Coleman, congratulations, Professor Keenan, on this well-deserved honor and recognition. So as you know, a named appointment is the highest distinction we bestow upon our faculty, reserved for those who excel in research, teaching, and engagement. As I've said before, it's always a great pleasure to acknowledge members of our Illinois faculty when they are invested into an endowed professorship. Truly, it never gets old. So yes, I'll have to add some writers on my contract next time. In fact, this is my fourth trip, as Dean Sharp mentioned, to the College of Law over the past 4 months to mark such a special occasion. And believe me, I would gladly do more with everyone once again. That's how much I enjoy these ceremonies. The students have graduation, the faculty have investiture ceremonies. Both are truly enjoyable events that allow us to formally commemorate what makes our campus the special place that it is. It is also a genuine pleasure to take a break from our day-to-day work, even on this very windy day, and to celebrate this special milestone with one of our esteemed faculty members, along with their family, friends, and colleagues here at the College of Law. So thinking about why we have named appointments is a great reminder of our fundamental mission as a university: to teach the next generation of students, to perform innovative path-breaking research, and then to share our knowledge with the world. It is important to remember what a distinction it is to earn such an honor at a university like ours. Illinois is an institution that never stands still. It's a place where bold ideas are encouraged, collaboration is second nature, and excellence is the baseline. Endowed professorships afford us a critical edge when it comes to ensuring that some of the most accomplished scholars on our campus, scholars such as Professor Keenan, continue to call Illinois home for many years to come. In today's academic marketplace, attracting the world's best and brightest scholars is paramount, and our students expect nothing less. So endowed professorships also act as a loud and clear reminder that Illinois is a place where hard work is rewarded and scholarly achievement is celebrated. They provide our faculty with the freedom and resources to take risks and to pursue ambitious projects and interdisciplinary collaborations. In short, an endowed professorship encourages a think big mindset that is one of the defining features of Illinois. For our faculty, an endowed professorship is also a powerful incentive to stay and grow with us, while also acknowledging their immense contribution to our vibrant intellectual community and the impact they've made beyond our campus. For our students, endowed professorships offer unparalleled access to leading experts who are actively shaping their fields. Experts like Professor Keenan and all the other brilliant minds from the College of Law that we've honored this past few months. During these special investiture celebrations, we're reminded of the shared values that define our university. So as a public institution, Illinois has a responsibility to serve not only our state, but our nation and the world. You couldn't ask for a better representative of that than Professor Keenan, whose scholarship, expertise, and real-world experience in human rights law and international law couldn't come at a more critical time. Professor Keenan, congratulations once again on this well-deserved achievement and our highest faculty distinction. So now I'd like to invite Dean Sharp back. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Santos. Okay, now we can turn to our honoree. I won't embarrass you too much, just a little. Patrick Keenan joined the College of Law faculty in 2001, and as our colleague, Professor Andy Leopold, rightly observed, he's been a pillar of the law school community since day one. Andy says, and I quote, "Pat is a highly regarded voice in international human rights law. His careful, thoughtful scholarship has enhanced our international reputation. His teaching is terrific, just ask his students. And he's been a wonderful colleague, someone who is supportive and fair to all." Well, Pat, we did ask your students, specifically your research assistant in current 3L, Caroline Azam. Caroline? Here. There she is. Hello. This is for the record. Quote, "It is hard to match Professor Keenan's knowledge and passion for international law. As a professor, he encourages critical thinking, disagreement, and greater understanding of the complexity of international legal issues. His teaching style is welcoming and inclusive, and he creates an environment that makes students feel comfortable talking about some of the most difficult issues, past and present, facing the international community. As a supervisor, Professor Keenan's curiosity, organization, and professionalism are unmatched. He trusts his research assistants to help define the scope of the project and to become an expert on the topic while providing guidance and structure. He's made me a better student and a better researcher, and I'm so grateful for his mentorship and wisdom." Professor Keenan is an expert in human rights and international law, and he holds campus appointments not only at the college, but also at the Center for Global Studies, the Center for African Studies, and the Lehman Center for Brazilian Studies. He's published articles and book chapters on a variety of issues, including the US drone program, human trafficking and tourism, and international criminal law and conflict minerals, and he's the co-author of the International Criminal Court in a Nutshell. His work has appeared in leading law reviews, and he's been quoted in numerous prominent media outlets. Professor Keenan's scholarship has also been cited in the United States Supreme Court, as well as in other federal courts. Professor Keenan is also an innovator with an entrepreneurial spirit. He launched and for 10 years directed the college's Human Rights Law Clinic, which gave our students an unparalleled opportunity to work directly with lawyers and advocates on important human rights cases. Apart from the clinic, Professor Keenan has pioneered several initiatives of significant local and international impact. He is one of the creators of the Kyiv Mohyla Academy Peer-to-Peer Writing Project, which matches law students in Kyiv with US-based law students and lawyers. The program, now in its sixth semester, is that right, the sixth semester, enables Ukrainian law students to work individually with English speakers who are sophisticated and experienced in legal writing, while simultaneously providing those on the US side the opportunity to mentor Ukrainian students and contribute to the advancement of legal education in Ukraine. Professor Keenan also co-created and for 18 years has co-organized the annual Why Lawyers Matter program, a partnership with the Federal Defender of the Central District of Illinois, which brings together legal scholars and practitioners to provide free training to lawyers representing indigent criminal defendants in federal court. It's therefore no understatement to say, and I'll once again quote Andy, quote, "Whether he is helping law students in Ukraine develop their own thinking on the importance of the rule of law, or mentoring first-generation law students who don't quite know what to expect in the professional world, Pat has helped generations of young lawyers become better, smarter, and more ethical." Professor Keenan graduated magna cum laude from Tufts University and earned his JD from Yale Law School. After graduation, he clerked for Judge Myron H. Thompson of the United States District Court for the Middle District of Alabama and served in the Peace Corps in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Prior to his time in academia, Professor Keenan defended indigent criminal defendants facing the death penalty in Georgia and Alabama at trial, on appeal, and in habeas proceedings as an attorney with the Southern Center for Human Rights. He joined the Academy in 2001, and while he spent the majority of his career right here with us at the College of Law, he's also served as a visiting professor at the University of Chicago Law School, Northwestern University Pritzker School of Law, and as a lecturer at Chuo University School of Law in Tokyo. Pat, please stand so that I might present you with the medallion marking your investiture as the Albert J. Harno Professor of Law. The podium is yours.
Thank you, Jamel, for those incredibly kind words. And it's wonderful to hear, especially if any of you know me, from our wonderful students. They say what we mean to say, typically very, very well. So I'm thrilled to have this honor. And I'm also grateful to the donors whose vision so many years ago is still supporting the College of Law. And thank you to Dr. Santos for coming back. Maybe you get an office here. I hope Jamel has at least given you a punch card so you can get a free donut or something. You deserve that and more, so thank you. And thanks to all of you for coming on this Friday before spring break. I think of these celebrations as a celebration of the College of Law, not as one individual person, but I am grateful to be singled out today. This day and every day, I am most grateful for my wonderful daughters. And I'm thrilled that they could come home for this event. As Jamel said, they are still in college, and so this is robbing them of some of their spring break. We remember, those of us who went to college, how precious those days were, and for them to come here and spend it with a bunch of old people and listen to their dad talk, I think is something to be celebrated, so I appreciate that. And one of the happy accidents of being a parent is that you can learn from your children. They've been my North Star since they were born, and I'm a better person because I've gotten to be their father. And of course, they wouldn't be the wonderful and thoughtful young women they are today if they didn't have an awfully good mother who has been a wonderful role model for them. And some of you may even know her and know that I am telling the truth about that. I also want to, at risk of forgetting someone, thank at least some of the people who have made my work and this day possible. I've worked with my research assistant, Amy Fitzgerald, for 15 years. It may feel like dog years to Amy, but it has only been 15 years. And it's been a pleasure all along the way, and I'm really grateful for everything that she's done. She solves problems I didn't know I had, and has been wonderful. I'm also thankful to Molly Lindsay, who's not my assistant, but she's worked on committees and done so many other things to make this place function, and done wonderful work. And Heather Ball, who with her team planned this event today, has planned most of the dozens of conferences that and other smaller events that I've hosted over the years and done them all really well. I've relied on our wonderful librarians over the years, and I won't call out every person's name, but you know that I email you a lot, and I'm grateful. And I'm really grateful to Hannah Dusenberry, Krista Gatke, Carrie Turner, Tyler Hunter, and others who helped organize the event today. So thank you for everything. I'm also thrilled, as Jamel said, to be the Harno Professor, because Dean Harno was such an extraordinary figure in American legal education. He 35 years as dean. Jamel's just getting started. I think he's got 30 or so years left, and we're holding you to that. And he was provost for several of the years that he was dean. And there's a lot I could say about him, but I do want to just call out one speech he gave before the National Conference of Bar Examiners. And the date of the speech is important, September 30th, 1941. After the war in Europe had started, London had been relentlessly bombed, and just 2.5 or so months before Pearl Harbor was attacked, it was clear that America was heading for war. And Harno talked in the speech about the sorry state of the world, as he put it, but he called these troubling times a responsibility and an opportunity for lawyers to serve the public. He talked about national service, and he said lawyers will be called, law students and lawyers will be called to national service, and that this was important. But also, he emphasized that's not the only place policy gets made. It's not the only place to serve. Instead, he said, policy takes form and finds expression in hundreds of communities across the country. And I think that is where he thought, and I agree, that's where lawyers do wonderful work that's often, as he put it, unnoticed and unsung. And so the fact that this endowed position exists at all is wonderful, but it's for someone who believes so deeply in service is something that makes me really happy. Another great pleasure, and one of the greatest pleasures of this whole season of Investitures, has been to hear about the scholarly origin stories of my colleagues. And these stories are sort of like the academic version of Peter Parker getting bitten by the spider, right? And turning into Spider-Man. And unfortunately, we don't get superpowers, but we do sometimes get curiosity and motivation that we just can't shake. And I remember Jake Shurkow talking about being a teenager in a high schooler in a library, I think at UCLA, and he read something that sparked his lifelong interest in intellectual property law. And Verity Winship talked about her why and where she was on our campus when she realized what it was. And Eric Johnson talked about a tough legal issue that came up early in his career in public service that just stuck with him, and how that issue informed and inspired and sometimes aggravated him for 30 years. And I have a similar story, but it's unique to me. Law, to me, is about power. It's not mainly about trying to resolve a question or a puzzle or trying to make sense of something that seems illogical. It's about how power is allocated in society. It's about how law determines or can help determine who's protected and who's vulnerable. And I remember vividly when this little spider bit me. I started to read the newspaper pretty much every day when I was 7 years old, a long time ago. And for reasons, excuse me, that I don't understand, my parents let me do that. And at first, the biggest effect was I read the sports section and only the sports section. And so I knew a lot about sports, and I would occasionally call into a radio station that had a trivia contest and win. And the prize was tickets to Cornell football games. And so Ivy League football doesn't seem like a big deal here in Big Ten country, but I was delighted as an 8-year-old. But then I started to notice stories about atrocities in Uganda. And I didn't know anything about Uganda. And this was the very early 1970s. Idi Amin took power in Uganda and committed all kinds of human rights violations. And this just stuck with me. That was the spider that bit me. And when I look back at these old newspapers recently to think, am I remembering right? Do I have the timing right? I noticed something that might be at least part of the explanation as to why this first caught me. Because if you see here on the very top of the page, Penyan is the town that I grew up in. It's a town of 3,000 people. And for some reason, a photographer from the big city newspaper from Rochester came to take pictures of Little Leaguers in my little town. And I was too young for Little League at this point, not too young to read the paper, but too young for Little League. And I was looking for a picture of my brother who had played Little League. And sadly, his picture did not appear. But I did get stuck on these stories. And I was outraged especially by the stories about Amin kicking out from Uganda all of the South Asians. And I was outraged. And this is a complicated story with a complicated history. And I don't mean to gloss over those complications, but to that point in my life, these incidents seemed outrageous. And I'd never met a South Asian person that I know of to that point. We did living on a little farm. You didn't meet a lot of different types of people. But I saw injustice, and that stuck with me. And even at 7 or 8 years old, I saw this as a power story about the abuse of power. And so you'll be shocked to learn that as a 7 or 8-year-old, you can't do a lot about it. But I thought, I need to do something. And so I remember asking my dad about this. And so like in the evenings, when we're doing chores in the barn, I would talk to him about this, and his usual response, and my kids can vouch, this does sound like him. He would say something really kind, like, yeah, that sounds terrible, but let's see if we can't focus on just getting the calves fed and the stalls cleaned out tonight, and then we can deal with this other problem tomorrow. So then I saw a story in the newspaper about Queen Elizabeth writing a letter to Idi Amin, asking for a Briton who was imprisoned in Uganda not to be executed. So I thought, well, that's going to work. So he needs to hear from me. So I decided I'm going to write a letter to the president of Uganda. And I remember being really worried that he wouldn't take it seriously because I didn't know how to write cursive yet. I only knew how to print. And so this little guy, that's the year that I wrote this letter. And I show you that picture not just to prove that I used to have hair, although that might be part of it, but because I was, this spider bit me at a very young age. And so it turns out it's really hard to get a hand-printed letter to the president of Uganda, at least from where I lived. And so my inspiration was not enough to change history, but it changed me. And I knew starting then, at that age, that I wanted to be a lawyer because I believed naively then, and still hopefully now, that law at its best can address this problem of power, the way that people who are vulnerable can sometimes need protection, the way that law can help shape the conditions to allow people to be the best and fullest version of themselves. And so this experience and some others led me to want to be an advocate and to try to tell the stories of vulnerable people, and then later learn the rules of law so that I could be a useful tool. And that's the work of advocates, and it's really important, and that's what I did when I represented people facing the death penalty in Georgia and Alabama. But eventually advocacy started to seem kind of limited. And I started to think about problems in a different way. Advocates often try to frame questions in a way that makes it seem like there is one and only one answer, and the answer is obvious. And to interpret the evidence, interpret the rules in a way that obscures instead of reveals. At least that's what other lawyers, lesser lawyers did. I only ever told the truth. But scholarship is different than that, right? Scholarship, really, we try to focus on the hardest questions and not glide over them and not distract from them, but really try to understand. So my motivations were the same motivations that led me to take my pencil to the green paper that we used in the 70s in elementary schools, but in different ways, using different tools. And so my work so far has been about two main topics: economic development law and international criminal law. And I've tried to address similar questions in each field. So to think about these, I have three questions that have motivated me, and even as my attention has gone from one perhaps subject or geographic area or something else to another, I've returned to these three questions. And so I want to talk really briefly about these and how that they have figured in my work. So the first question is to ask, what's the conventional wisdom in law missing about whatever problem it is that I'm looking at? And so, for example, one of the things that I think really the issues that plague scholarship, especially in human rights, is that a lot of human rights scholars have what I think of as a sort of precious or unrealistic view of the actors involved. And so, for example, I fell victim to this. I wrote a couple of papers very early in my career about how better to create better economic outcomes in developing countries that were either blessed or cursed with a lot of resources. And so I argued that corporations, governments, and local community, people from local communities should have engaged in kind of structured consultations. And it seemed like an obviously good idea, and it was also consistent with what other human rights scholars were saying. But I was lucky to have conversations with our colleague Tom Hewlin, who, as those of you who know him know, he was extraordinarily generous with his time, but also had a knack that was essential for our conversations, for answering stupid questions in a really kind way. And so he kept my curiosity going, and he helped me understand lots of different literatures. The law and other literatures weren't speaking to each other. And Tom was not just a good translator, but he was a good teacher. And I didn't realize that I was being taught, but I have come to appreciate it. And so he helped me, and I still have work to do, a ways to go, but to understand the empirical work that passed his high standards, his very high standards. And one of the most robust findings was the kind of consultations that I was recommending. I remember meeting with the general counsels from the International Finance Corporation and the World Bank and the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, these big international institutions, and saying, here's how you fix the problems that you have. Turns out I was wrong, and most people were wrong. Because one of the things that's true about every community, even poor communities that have been treated terribly, is they can be dysfunctional. And the dysfunction can be both demonstrated and it's sort of predictable. Any process, or all the processes that have been studied without lots of safeguards, kind of fall victim to the same problems. Men take over the process. Relatively wealthier people, even in poor communities, take over the process. Women are left out. So my recommendations were kind of intuitively logical, but what I was missing, what the law literature was missing, was all this other evidence about how things actually worked. And so I went back to the drawing board, came up with different approaches. And this idea of looking and to try to understand what are we not seeing, what's not here, is difficult, but I think necessary. In a paper on the U.S. drone program, the similar kinds of issues came up about the ways that the law characterized harm to civilian communities, and only looking at deaths and not looking at all of the other harms that come from communities that live under threat of attack from drones. And so the law was kind of looking at a really stylized, unrealistic version of the world. And there was another literature that, thankfully, Tom Euland's still willing to answer my dumb questions about, was done in a robust, in a way that the findings could be taken seriously, that showed that there were lots of other harms that should have counted in the law. So looking for what we're missing, I think, has been one of the things I've tried to do. Another thing I've tried to do is to think about what makes a process fair or unfair. So when communities or powerful actors and any vulnerable people are sitting across the table from each other, what makes that interaction fair? And you have to have sort of a theory of fair, and so Heidi Hurd and others have been very helpful in at least thinking through that. Whether, I don't know that she would agree with what I came up with, but she helped me, at least my ideas are better because of my interactions with her. And one of the things that's certainly true is that information asymmetry is a big problem. And so governments and wealthy actors tend to have a lot more information. So with a lot of digging and kind of looking through evidence and looking at the ways that wealthy leaders try to hide money and learning new techniques, research techniques that are almost like investigative journalism, I was able to show, kind of the ways both that money can be hidden, but also the ways that local people who should own the resources that their government is selling don't have the information they need. And without that, what's missing from this process is a critical kind of political check. There's not the same sort of accountability tool that would be necessary. And so in other papers, I looked at kind of the ways, for example, conflict minerals were regulated and the process by which the conflict minerals rules were written. And there were Western human rights advocates sitting down with banks and others to talk about how the rules should look and how they should be written. And local communities were kind of left out. And so they didn't, the result wasn't what local communities wanted. And the local people might have been wrong. They're whatever they wanted, it might not have been ideal either, but without them, the process was unfair. And sometimes you find things you don't want. Looking at international criminal tribunals set up for noble purposes, trying to achieve righteous just ends, what you see is judges keep changing the law all the time, and usually in ways I think, oh, that's nice, that like the violence, people who use violence are creative, so the law should change. But when those legal changes are done in what amounts to a lawless way, then even in the service of righteous ends, then the system is not fair. And so looking in these different contexts, it's not the same phenomenon, but looking for, asking what makes this process fair has been an important guiding light for me. And the last set of questions is to think about, okay, so what can we do? In thinking about this, the kinds of problems that I've talked about, the kinds of problems that all law professors work on, are hard to solve. If they were easy to solve, they wouldn't be problems. They wouldn't make us curious. They'd already be solved. So when I was a little boy, I reached for the only tool I had, a pencil that I printed, not even in cursive writing, to try to come up with a solution that didn't work. And I'm not sure the solutions I have come up with as a scholar are any better. They're easier to read, but I'm not sure they're better. But to me, they need to be grounded in a couple of things. One is an understanding of the doctrine. You have to know the doctrinal plumbing of whatever you're talking about. And the second is to think about what's the actual world we live in, not a world where you abstract away or assume away the complications, the imperfect institutions, the imperfect actors who populate the world. So, for example, in human rights, one of the things that we see a lot is kind of just saying a declaration that something is a problem or something is illegal. That doesn't help us. That doesn't tell us much. It's important. You know, what's happening right now in Iran is illegal. The U.S. is violating the law every day. Iran is violating the law egregiously with tragic consequences every single day. But that doesn't take us very far. So looking at the doctrinal plumbing is really important. So, for example, in an article on conflict minerals, I argued not in favor of a new law, because I didn't think that was realistic, but looking at are there ways existing rules can be applied to the actual phenomenon, the phenomenon of warlords during armed conflict pillaging mining resources that affects thousands and thousands of people who we don't usually notice. And I argued that you could, without changing the law, avoiding the problem of that I mentioned before about changing the law in a lawless way, you could account for these harms, create opportunities for more reparations, and go after those who are most responsible for the abuses. And I remember when this article came out, I got a call from a Navy JAG prosecutor who worked with local prosecutors in Congo and other countries on these issues, and was developing and wanted to develop together a training program for them, so that he said that's one of the things that seemed most, why this was appealing to him was, you don't have to change the law. You don't have to go to the legislature and change the law. You don't have to try to convince a court to change the law. All you have to do is assemble evidence in a different way using the same rules. For better and for worse, there was an election in 2016, and the way the U.S. engages with the world changed a lot after that, so I'm not sure that his program had the legs that we both wished that it had. But it was, I think, instructive to me. So these issues that I've talked about make up kind of this huge web of laws and rules and norms that are international law and international human rights law. And as Dr. Santos said, these are critical issues now. What's fundamental here, though, I think is something that I would have struggled to articulate as a little boy, and that is that the commitment to law in this way is a commitment to a certain way of talking about power and to shaping power. It's about looking for fairness and accountability and transparency, accessibility, all those characteristics. So law can be a way that power is abused. I saw that in court in Georgia and Alabama, but it can also be a way that, that vulnerable people can be protected. So there's a memo from White House counsel Alberto Gonzales to President George W. Bush just 4 months after the September 11th attacks. And in that memo, the memo was about whether the U.S. could waterboard and do other things during interrogations that amounted to torture. And what Gonzalez wrote was, there's a new paradigm, this terrorism paradigm, and I quote, "This new paradigm renders obsolete the Geneva Convention's strict limitations on questioning of enemy prisoners and renders quaint some of its provisions." That has to be wrong. We should think like Harno, that recognize the sorry state of the world, if that's what we think, but see this as a time for lawyers to exercise what Harno called our responsibility and our commitment to law and to make the world better. So what's next for me is to keep asking many of these questions in new areas, ideally with students like wonderful students like Caroline, and a project that she and I worked on together with the European Law Institute and also with one of our alums, and bringing together all these different parts of the Illinois community has been really special. So there are more problems to look at, and I'm sure that I will spend time on those. And I'll close by asking you to indulge a personal story. So I'm done with sort of the grandiose stuff, but there's some sentimentality on the way. So if you don't like that, you can go out and get lunch now. Heather, I think, has the lunch set up. So throughout this season of investitures, it's been interesting to hear people talk about and thank their families, our wonderful students, the staff who make our jobs great, colleagues who support and challenge us, and the donors who make all this possible. But there's another part of the story that I think we've mentioned, but we haven't talked about enough. And that's something I think about literally every day when I come in this building. It's not an exaggeration. And that's the incredible role of universities, what they are and what they can be. I'm the middle of three siblings. For brothers 2 years older, about my sister who's less than 2 years younger. And when my little sister graduated from college, my brother and father and I were in, I think it was her departmental graduation. It wasn't the big ceremony. It was in a room that was about this size, and every seat was taken, so we gave up our seats and we're standing in the back. And I remember it being really, really hot. And as things were ending, I looked over and I saw my father had tears running down his cheeks. And that was kind of a shock. I didn't know to that point that his eyes made liquid like everybody else's did. There was some talk, my siblings and I have talked about this since, that he might have shed a tear when our best dog died, when I was young. But it was, at that point, it was like finding out that he knew Mandarin or that he could juggle or something. And so as we stood there, I said something stupid like you do when you're that age, or at least like I did. And my father didn't flinch. He just said, my grandfather went down in a coal mine for the first time when he was 13. And that's when he was done with school. And my father finished high school, and from a month after that, he finished high school, went to the war, and from a month after he got home until a month before he died, he worked in a typewriter factory. And you know what I did. And what my father did was go to college for less than a year and leave under not great circumstances. And he went to night school for 6 years to get an associate's degree. And he worked full-time on the farm and usually a full-time off the farm so he could have health insurance. And then he said, that's work people do because they have to, because you have to provide. But now my children are educated, and you can do what you want. You can choose. And it's probably the longest speech he ever gave that wasn't either about hunting or the Yankees or bragging about his granddaughters to the other very indulgent old guys who they used to swap. Grandchildren are great stories. And my mother's side of the family had a similar story. We learned to read when we were still enslaved. And that was an incredible tool, even despite racism and all the challenges. And my daughters are surely sick of hearing about this, but Margaret's family has a similar story of education and how that allowed some members of her family to prosper in the old country and to make their way here. In fact, I'm not sure if she knows this, but her father once pulled me aside. He's sort of very serious and said to me, there are 3 things that a man should do. Educate your children, own land, and read Voltaire in French. And I've done 2 of those 3 things, and you can guess which ones. But now I think every day about want to jobs versus have to jobs. I think about it when I pull in the parking lot or when I get off the bus to come in the building. And my father certainly wasn't denigrating have to jobs. That's what he did. That was his life. And I know he's not the first person to express these ideas. So this isn't novel, but it's noteworthy. It's worth pausing over. As faculty, we have the ultimate want to jobs. We get to think about and write about whatever we want. We get to work with really talented students and colleagues. There's a whole infrastructure of wonderful staff people who exist to support our want to jobs and help this place run. And more importantly, what's most important for me is we're empowering our students to have want to jobs. Education is transformative. We can empower students with the skills and attitudes that they'll need to be the best version of themselves. And universities can be transformative for families, for generations. You can get to the middle class. You can hold on to the middle class through universities. For people who don't know what it's like not to have enough. You may think this is overblown, but it's not. And I know as academics, we're supposed to be jaded, and we're supposed to be kind of too cool to talk about these sentimental things. And I said before, this will out me as a sentimental person. And that's true, and it's okay. I'm not a crazy person. I know the university is an employer too. And one of the finest traditions of the academy is complaining about how we're overworked and underpaid. And every professor in here, if we gave each other truth serum, we think we're overworked and underpaid. That's true about staff, actually. It's not like they actually are. Faculty, maybe not I am, but maybe not the rest of you. And so I'm sure that Jamel and Dr. Santos get a lot of suggestions from faculty about how our lives can be better. And that's normal, even if it's annoying to them. And I'm not promising to stop doing it. But we are at a moment in the life of our nation when we should pause and think about what universities offer to society. We get to be part of what I think is the most effective engine of transformation that exists in our society right now. Students come to our campus from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of experiences, all kinds of needs, all kinds of talents. Some have every tool they need to be the best version of themselves. Some come in needing a lot. Universities are essential because we have the potential to lift up everyone who can put in the work. We have the potential to meet everyone where they are and help them get to a place that they want to get to. If you're already there, then what I'm talking about may seem foreign to you. But if you're not, you know it's true. And so we've rightly spent this semester celebrating the work that happens here, and it's been really fun to have this day where I am the person singled out, but it's the work that everyone is doing. And we've thanked our families for their many indulgences and the generous donors who make this possible, and the students we get to work with and the staff who make this place run. But let's also take a minute to recognize this incredible university that we get to be a part of. We get to have want to jobs because it exists. And so with this little burst of sentimentality over, and mindful that I am standing between you and spring break, I will end where I started with profound gratitude to my children for their love and example, to this place, the College of Law, and the donors that made this possible, and our students, staff, and faculty, and to the great university that we get to be part of. Thank you.
Pat, it's not a surprise to me that on a day to honor all of your achievements, you provide us with a necessary, insightful, and rousing defense of the unique place that the university plays in our society and the role that it can play, not just for societal cohesion and advancement, but for empowerment and ennobling the individual. Thinking always of the right of the human being to chart their own path, to be treated with dignity and respect, and have the opportunity to grow and to learn, to live their lives with dignity. No surprise that that's how you decide to end our investiture season, the 25-26 academic year. Thank you for those profound words. I will no longer stand between you and the buffet that is in the pavilion, so please join us. You can congratulate Pat more informally, and thank you all for attending. Thank you very much. Very nicely done. Yeah, congratulations.